In the last few years, the NBA media landscape has started to look like the sports version of the Kardashians. It seems like every couple of weeks, some former player grabs national headlines and creates drama out of thin air. Isaiah Thomas recently went off on LeBron.
I would never let one of my players walk out on the floor looking like this.
Kendrick Perkins had notable beefs with Draymond Green, Kevin Durant, LeBron, and plenty of others. Shaquille O'Neal might be the biggest provocateur of all, having public feuds with JaVale McGee,
I don't watch Shaq.
Dwight Howard, Rudy Gobert, KD, Donovan Mitchell.
You don't have what it takes to get to the next level. I said it on purpose. I want you to hear it. What do you have to say about that?
All right.
As well as beefing with other analysts like Shannon Sharpe. Shaq's colleague on Inside the NBA, Charles Barkley, often shows distaste for the current state of the NBA, bashing the style of play and calling players soft.
They don't play every game, they rest, they fly private jets. When I played, we flew commercial.
Chuck's recent feud with the Lakers coach J.J. Redick is just the tip of the iceberg, as he's had feuds with Kobe, Bron, and KD, along with many others. Even former players who are not constantly featured on national media find ways to criticize when they appear on various podcasts. Wally Szczerbiak called Tyrese Halliburton a wannabe all-star, completely unprompted.
Last chance down 3 for the wannabe all-star. Let me keep it that way. He's in his second year. He's a very good player. He's not going to make the all-star team.
Although Halliburton is a much better player than Szczerbiak ever was.
No disrespect to the people who come before me, but I don't know, he had a lot to say about me. I was really questioning, first, who is this?
Magic Johnson often finds a way to poke current players, most recently clashing with Anthony Edwards.
So I had to just hit him, look, man, talk to me when you want something.
When Edwards spoke about not wanting to be the face of the NBA, LeBron stood in his defense, citing the trend of negative media coverage.
Why do you want to be the face of a league when all the people that that cover our game and talk about our game on a day-to-day basis on everybody?
The NBA is the only sports league in the world where former players and media are constantly talking trash about the current players and downgrading the level of the product, even though the skill level in the NBA is the highest it's ever been. Meanwhile, in the NFL, you don't hear Joe Montana going on podcasts and throwing young quarterbacks under the bus. Wayne Gretzky never downplays the current level of hockey in the NHL, and Derek Jeter doesn't talk trash about today's shortstops in Major League Baseball. But why is the NBA so toxic? Why did it become the National Hater League? How did creating drama seem to become the media's main goal, instead of praising the sport and the superstars who push the league forward? Some 40 years ago, back in the 80s, the relationship between the NBA superstars and the media was in a much better place. The league had a much smaller following, and both the league and its stars needed to have great relationships with journalists, since it was in everybody's best interest to push a great story forward. So beat reporters used to travel with stars on team flights. They'd grab drinks and have dinner with players, and the relationships were so intimate that reporters even got invited to players' homes. Jack McCallum, a longtime NBA writer for Sports Illustrated, covered Michael Jordan's career intimately, and it was a mutually beneficial friendship, since Jordan needed a media voice to increase visibility as there was no widespread TV coverage.
All of our games are on television every single day. In the 80s and the 90s, you may be able to catch one game if you had it locally. If your team had a local broadcast deal, you could catch it. And if not, then you may not see a game once every couple of days. You maybe catch 1 or 2 games, every other week.
Occasionally, McCallum and other beat writers would write something negative about the players they were covering, but due to the long-lasting relationships they've built, those disagreements would be smoothed out instantly. By the late 90s, the popularity of the NBA blew up, and so did the coverage of the league. Even though beat reporters still had the most powerful voice, TV shows like Inside the NBA started to gain a lot of traction. When Charles Barkley joined Kenny Smith and Ernie Johnson on TNT, the show became a sensation.
You're a rookie, you'll go last. Kenny Smith is here. Peter Vesey is here.
And what separated Inside the NBA from all the other media forms was their sense of humor, along with the traditional basketball commentary.
I got my new aim high hyper. Nike made their own shoe for me. Hold on, that's the wrong foot.
And even though the guys on Inside criticized players, Smith and Barkley had all the credibility in the world, since they were both former players, and because they weren't shy of making fun of themselves.
And that's my mother's birthday. Happy birthday, Mom.
Hey, your mom's birthday on Halloween?
Halloween, man.
I'm not even gonna touch that.
You met my mother yesterday. You better be nice.
I love your mother.
There you go.
But then, in 2007, ESPN launched First Take with Skip Bayless, who first popularized debate shows in America.
Their superstar, their MVP, their Michael Jordan refused to play in the second half when he had a little finger injury.
However, it wasn't until 2012 and Stephen A. Smith's arrival at First Take that the show really exploded, becoming the #1 sports talk show in America. Bayless and Smith's passionate debates captured audiences unlike anything else on TV, and they became more popular than the majority of the players they were covering, even though their knowledge of the sport was moderate at best.
Well, first of all, you have the presumption that people care what you say. They don't.
Bayless recognized that controversy spiked the ratings far more than any positive talk, so he kept milking the cash cow. He first garnered national attention by critiquing Allen Iverson.
I don't know you, but trust me, I do not hate you. And I sincerely love, and I've said this many times, watching the offensive shows that you do put on. And I sincerely hope I have now inspired you to win your first NBA championship. But it ain't going to happen.
And with LeBron James, he went one step further, becoming the biggest, or at least the loudest, LeBron hater in the world.
The most talented player in the game, in 4 of the last 5 playoffs, has flamed out.
Skip became known as the person who feuds with athletes and says obnoxious things that no one else would dare to say.
I think you're having a problem crushing me because you've avoided every question that we've asked you.
When Chris Bosh joined the Heat, Skip started calling him Bosh Spice because he felt Bosh played soft and with a lack of aggression.
To me, it's going over the line when you say Bosh Spice, because that's referring to him as being a female.
Bosh had a problem with the Bosh Spice nickname, and so he went on First Take and confronted Skip.
My great-grandfather, my father, my grandfather, my aunts and uncles, we're very prideful with the Bosh name, and I don't like it being made fun of, and I don't think they appreciate it either.
But Skip didn't care because he was drawing more viewers than anybody else on TV. That's all that mattered to him. Back then, social media was in its infancy, and athletes didn't have the voice or the platform to combat hot takes from the likes of Bayless and Stephen A. And because they were so good at what they did, Bayless and Smith started a revolution where it no longer mattered to have great relationships with the players, as long as the ratings were good. Over the next decade, debate shows started to blossom, with many of them saying outlandish stuff to boost the ratings.
Damn it, I'm tired of this, man. I'm tired of stuff like this. Ooh, I got you. You all right? I'm sorry, I did too much.
But with the rise of technology and social media, the athletes started talking too, creating shows and podcasts of their own. However, even though the athletes could finally fight back and had full control over their words, the media discourse didn't get any better. In fact, it got worse.
There were infamous moments in First Take's history where an athlete went directly to a talker and said, "You don't know what you're talking about."
With new podcasts emerging seemingly every day, there was a complete frenzy resembling reality TV. Instead of talking about basketball and everyday storylines of the NBA, a lot of media coverage became responding to what other people said on various podcasts and talk shows.
Why you like that? I'm just telling you, I want to punch his ass in the face. I do.
If you feel that strongly about something, he's seen me a million times. If he feel that strongly about it, then punch me in my face when you see me.
Soon enough, the new media, a term coined by Draymond Green, was battling the old media and the likes of Stephen A. Smith and Kendrick Perkins, who were still thriving on debate shows. Perkins in particular became a national sensation for his hot takes.
When you come on TV and now you're taking yourself out of the basketball space and you coming on here and you being the NBA analyst, homies don't matter no more. You gotta come on here and speak the truth.
And a willingness to upset current NBA players, some of whom were his former teammates.
We all need to come to realization that James Harden's game is on the decline right before our very eyes.
Like many others, Big Perk followed the blueprint set up by Skip Bayless. But since he was a former player and an NBA champion, his voice was arguably even more powerful, and it set up a series of controversies that became national news. Perk had beef with Kevin Durant, calling his move to Golden State the weakest he's ever seen. A few years later, Perk had a feud with Draymond, who didn't hold anything back.
Because all these dumb talking heads and never done it, they don't understand it. Even the one that has done it don't act like he's done it because he's an idiot and a moron and wasn't really that good of a player. And so I'm talking about Kendrick Perkins, by the way.
Of course, Perkins retaliated, which created another wave of news cycle that had nothing to do with the actual NBA.
We all know, dog. We all know you all buck and no bite. We know this. The NBA brothers know this.
When LeBron James had an on-court disagreement with Stephen A. Smith about the coverage of his son Bronny, Stephen A. went on a talking marathon about the incident.
That wasn't a basketball player confronting me. That was a parent. That was a father. And I can't sit here and be angry or feel slighted by LeBron James in any way in that regard.
Smith talked about LeBron for a whole week.
I thought it was weak. I thought it was some bullshit. But in the moment, I knew that I was listening to a father.
And Perkins joined in, citing that he's no longer friends with James and that he blocked him on social media. Players have long hated being criticized, but something is different now. The comments are meaner, nastier, and more personal.
I think people in the media have gotten too comfortable, especially with our sport. They got too comfortable where, back in the day, like for sure, you would never bring up Charles Oakley's brother.
Yeah.
Charles Oakley will smack you through his brother.
When Charles Barkley said that the Grizzlies point guard John Morant wasn't the kind of player who made his teammates better, Morant replied with one word on Twitter: knee pads, alluding that Barkley can assume the kneeling position to not be more graphic. Even though Barkley's criticism of Morant was fairly reasonable at the time and wasn't really trash talk, what Sir Charles ranted about J.J. Redick and the Lakers can hardly be described as constructive criticism.
JJ, if you come for the king, you better not miss. Because I can get you, brother, because I got your Lakers games. We're the reason ratings are down. Oh, we're the reason. We're the reason, like we playing.
If I'm a casual fan and you tell me every time I turn on the television that the product sucks, well, I'm not going to watch the product. And that's really what has happened over the last 10 to 15 years. I don't know why. It's not funny to me.
Redick's remarks were on point, because what's the point of berating the league that feeds everyone's mouths, including those of analysts? But Barkley strongly disagreed, doubling down on his take that the league is in a bad place with the amount of three-point shooting.
If you're just going to come out and have a three-point shooting contest every night, that's going to turn the average fan off.
However, with all the comparisons to old times and that players in the previous eras were better, it's hard to argue with JJ's point. Granted, basketball in the 90s was more physical, and it's the biggest reason why the players from that era think of today's players as soft. But just because the rules allowed guys to punch each other when driving to the basket, it doesn't mean the actual basketball was better. On the contrary, the level of basketball is better than ever, as pretty much every player can dribble, pass, and shoot. Moreover, in today's NBA, it's much harder to play defense, because you gotta run after the Steph Currys of the world for an entire possession.
Curry for three, yes sir!
You can't grab people because of the hand-checking rule, and you can't knock players out under the pretense of playing hard defense. On offense, there's a lot more passing before the actual shot.
One more. Harris, three more.
And since there's more space on the floor, there's much more player movement, screening, and cutting. More often than not, all 5 players are involved in the action and touch the ball before the actual shot. And sure, while it's true that a lot of shots in the current NBA are three-pointers, what some old NBA players and fans seem to forget is that the 3 is simply replacing the long 2, because it's more efficient and players are more skilled to hit from the outside. Yes, it's not all positive, as some of the fouls called today are really ticky-tacky, and because of the taunting rule, you can hardly celebrate a great play without receiving a technical foul.
Come on, man. No way. Come on, man.
But overall, the level of basketball is at an all-time high. And even though over 40% of all shots are three-pointers, the action that precedes the three-point shot is filled with a great deal of skill, dribble penetration, movement, and cutting. Compare it to the 90s and the early 2000s when the game was played inside the three-point arc, you'll see a lot of static play, with the majority of players just standing around and watching one player dribble the ball for 20 seconds against one defender in isolation. But even with all the knowledge available,
half the league attempted 400 or more total threes in the first 6 seconds of the shot clock. So these early shot clock threes, same thing, 55%.
Really?
It's a good shot.
I can't wrap my head around it. Am I too old school?
In the clear evolution in basketball play, you still get old heads talking about the good old times, and that players from this era couldn't play 30 or 40 years ago. Most players who played in the 90s are still going on various podcasts and saying that Jordan would average 50 in today's game. While it's true that MJ was the greatest player of his era, it's complete nonsense to think he would average 20 points more than Steph, KD, LeBron, or Jokic. And do you know why we know that's nonsense? Because Jordan didn't average 20 points more than Adrian Dantley, Dominique Wilkins, and Larry Bird when he played against them. By the same logic, if Jordan would average 50, then Dantley, Bird, and Neek would all score over 40 and would be better players than pretty much any player of today. And do you really think that Adrian Dantley is a better player than LeBron or KD? Look, with all respect to Dantley, who was a heck of a player, he's not better than those guys. And the question should be, could he play in today's era? Not the other way around. A big reason why there's hate from old NBA alumni is jealousy stemming from the fame, status, and money that the current players are enjoying today. Role players of today earn 10 times what superstars got 30 or 40 years ago. And that's not sitting well with some of the old heads, especially since they had to fly commercial, didn't have proper health care, and were dealing with elbows to the head from opponents nightly. However, on the flip side, modern NBA players are under more scrutiny than ever before, with everyone and their grandma commenting on their every mistake.
Ja Morant has the skill, the speed, and the star power to make him one of the faces of the NBA. But for the second time in 3 months, we're not talking about his unique talent. We're talking about his choices.
In today's media, every shortcoming of a great player too often draws comparisons with the players of old and sparks another hot debate of who was better. If LeBron passes up the opportunity to get a three-point shot, there are great chances that Stephen A. Smith will go on First Take the next day and talk about how LeBron doesn't have a killer mentality and that Jordan would never pass up that shot.
What the hell was that?
And that kind of talk is unnecessary. There's also no reason to throw current players under the bus every other day.
I had Jordan #1, Kobe #2, and I had James Harden at #3, and I was tripping.
To be fair, Stephen A., Kendrick Perkins, and Charles Barkley, they're great at what they do. But to validate JJ Redick's point, you can still be great at talking about basketball without diminishing the value of the NBA and its current superstars. People like Kevin Garnett, Matt Barnes, and Larry Bird are always complimentary about today's players.
You see these old broken down NBA players talking about their era and how great they were back then, and the players today are not as good as they were back then. That's crazy, man. I mean, obviously you haven't seen LeBron James the last 17, 18 years. You didn't see Klay Thompson score 37 points in one quarter. Or obviously you don't see James Harden come down the lane getting ready to dunk on whoever's standing there. I mean, it's just amazing how these guys are playing the game today, and I couldn't be more prouder of them.
And they have great, successful shows without bashing the modern era. I don't see why former players feel like it's their spot, or does it make them feel better to disrespect these guys? To me, this is super weak. I don't like it. There's been 5,000 players in the history of the NBA, so that's why it bothers me when former players feel like they have to shit on the younger players. Matt Barnes. However, in the world we live in, negativity and drama will get more clicks and views than celebrating basketball. That's why, for example, ESPN fired Zach Lowe, who is one of the best analysts in the history of the profession, while Stephen A. Smith has a contract more lucrative than 80% of NBA players. That being said, it's fair to say that the current NBA media ecosystem is flawed, but both sides can still find some form of middle ground. Most fans don't want to watch Mind the Game every day and dwell on basketball tactics Monday through Sunday. For a casual fan, it's easier and more fun to follow debate shows. And that's perfectly fine, as both programs can coexist, and all parties involved can have mutual respect for each other.
Why are you shooting the ball in warm-up and you never shoot it in the game?
I shoot when I have to, Chuck.
Enjoy the beautiful game of basketball and the great league that is the NBA. Thank you for watching. And if you like this video, we have another one for you right here.